Yesterday, hearing oral arguments involving access to sex reassignment treatment for minors. The justices weighing whether a law in Tennessee which bans this medical care passes constitutional muster. Joining us now is the state's Attorney General, Jonathan Skrmetti, and he was there inside, and he was arguing as the defendant, of course, because the Biden administration sued Tennessee. I'm going to play two different sound bites from the arguments from the justices. Let's start with Justice Sotomayor, who made this example, and it got some pushback. Watch.
I'm sorry, counselor. Every medical treatment has a risk. Even taking aspirin. There is always going to be a percentage of the population under any medical treatment that's going to suffer a harm. So the question in my mind is not, do policymakers decide whether one person's life is more valuable than the millions of others who get relief from this treatment?
Do you anticipate that that would have been her take, and how did you react to it?
So, when any medical decision is made, there are always risks involved, and that's the legislature's job to determine how to regulate the practice of medicine. They look at the risks, they look at the benefits. In these cases, we're talking about kids making decisions that could result in lifelong lack of fertility, lifelong lack of sexual function, a lifetime of dealing with cognitive impairments, tumors, bone density disorders, blood clots. So there are really serious risks, and every systematic analysis of the evidence shows minimal to no benefits to kids from these procedures. So we knew there'd be some pushback, I think, about the calculus the legislature employed. But at the end of the day, the Constitution leaves that decision with the legislature, and our elected officials in Tennessee made a very rational decision based on the evidence.
And it certainly wasn't about aspirin. Justice Brett Kavanaugh had warnings from European countries. Listen here.
I want to weigh in before they listen to this judge here. I personally think that doctors has done a remarkable job in the past 200 years in advanced medicine. And there's so much to this day that they still haven't fully performed in pertaining to understanding various things about the body, especially compared to different people that has different types of makeups. But whenever doctors start leaning towards wanting to clone other people from other people's DNA, whenever doctors start allowing for people of changing their type of sex, of whether or not you're a male and you decide that you want to be a female, or a female and you want to be a male, regardless whether you do it surgically or you do it medically, I think it's going beyond the boundaries of what God truly intended for a doctor to do. Now, there's no doubt doctors throughout my life have been a golden asset to me, of so many different injuries that I've had, regardless whether it was having to have a kidney removed at the age of 2 weeks, getting almost electrocuted to death, falling out of a pickup truck doing 60 miles an hour to a hayfield whenever I was about 12 years old. I could go on and on and on about the various injuries towards the doctors putting Humpty Dumpty back together again, that I think has been a marvel in and of itself, a miracle marvel, because if I wasn't living in the era that I'm living in right now, even probably one or two of those incidences that occurred in my life, I wouldn't be here. And the first incident would have been having a polycystic kidney that I had to have removed whenever I was only 2 weeks old, 2 or 3 weeks old. Remember, I was just an infant that in 1961 was basically unheard of. I was basically an experimental child up in northern part of Illinois, in Antioch, Illinois, up around St. Teresa's Hospital, where it was predominantly run by Catholics and some very, very well-educated, smart people. So whenever I talk about the medical industry, I want to talk out of basically both sides of my mouth at the same time by saying what kind of a remarkable good job that they have done, especially whenever it comes to curing different diseases that different people have had, especially whenever it comes to trying to treat elderly people and making sure that they're more comfortable as they're drifting away into another world. I think that they've done a remarkable job. Hospice has done a remarkable job. I couldn't do it. I couldn't go to people's homes or be in the hospital working while I was deliberately keeping people under some sort of cytosis of being, basically unconscious while they was basically dying. But if you've ever watched a person die, a lot of people, whenever they're dying, they go through excruciating pains, and they groan and they moan and they scream and they cry and they holler and all the above. So the medical industry in that perspective has done a remarkable job. But whenever it comes to them standing up to the plate and aborting children, knowing that young girl had already had one or two abortions, and she's basically doing it just to keep from carrying a child. Whenever it comes to doctors changing the species of a person from a male to a female to a female to a male, whenever it comes to them cloning an individual from somebody's DNA, that way, if you're rich enough to be able to afford to do something like this, if you ever get in trouble to the degree that you need a lung, you need a heart, you need a kidney, you need whatever, well, you can just take it from your clone that you've had cloned. I think that the medical industry has went way beyond where they should be right now in playing God. If it was meant for a female to be a male, don't you think that she would have been male? She would have been a male versus a female at birth. If it was meant for a female to be a male, don't you think that vice versa, that he would have been born that way? Sure, he would have had. How come? That's kind of like Michael Jackson. I want to bring Michael Jackson up into this conversation a little bit. Michael Jackson must have hated the fact that he was black. And why a person wants to degrade their genealogy makeup is beyond me. But Michael Jackson done everything in the world that he could to change his skin color from black to white. What makes a person do that? I personally think that person needs some sort of help. They need psychiatric help. They need to be turned around. They need to be convinced, hey, you need to live with what you got. I mean, you can't help it. That's kind of like your in-laws. You got your brothers, your sisters. You've got other in-laws. Well, you can't choose your in-laws. You can choose to not have a relationship with your in-laws, but you can't choose your in-laws, because your in-laws is your in-laws, regardless whether you like them, love them, hate them, or whatever. They're still your in-laws. They're still your kinfolks. They're still your loved ones. They still carry the same DNA that you carry. You may not want to be around them, but you can't deny that they're kin to you in some form or fashion. Even if there was another father involved, even if there was another mother involved, as long as it's a partial DNA there, it's still part of you. And I didn't really understand that, because I went through some very grievous situations in my life at the age of 63, especially at the age of 14, whenever I lost my older brother that died on a motorcycle accident while being on his last assignment towards doing something for me. I didn't realize how devastating that you get down to the last of the Mohegans regarding me losing my youngest sibling. Out of all the siblings that I've ever lost, including that one at the age of 14, my youngest brother hurt. And it didn't hurt necessarily because of the relationship that me and him had today, but it hurt because of the relationship that we had years and years ago when we was only toddlers growing up, getting our butts torn up and going through the things that we was going through together. And of course, as you get older, you separate. But whenever I lost my last sibling that I knowed that I was, in fact, the last of the Mohegans, that done something to me. It done something to me that all the other brothers, as well as my mother, as well as my father, as well as my grandmother and my grandfather, as well as my cousins, uncles, whoever, those people had an effect on my life of dying. Don't think for a second that they didn't, because they did, but not in the same way that me losing my younger brother. And I guess some of that may have been brought on because of the resistances that we was receiving here in Northwest Tennessee whenever I moved back to Northwest Tennessee in 2014 and basically went through hell for 3 consecutive solid years and trying to fit in. And various people throughout the neighborhood around here, the community, didn't want us to fit in. Matter of fact, they just wanted me to die. They wanted me to leave like a scalded dog with its tail stuck between its legs. That way I would have given up on ever thinking about rebonding back into this same neighborhood, because so many of them had already done burnt the bridges about me. And I'm talking about people that have known me ever since I was just like 6, 7 years old, all my life. Turned on me. And the reason why they turned on me was because of all the gossip. Was because of how they felt about me. And the reason why they felt the way that they felt about me wasn't because of anything that I had done to them. I had not burnt them any type of a deal. I didn't try to cheat on them or take away this or steal that or do this to them or do that to them. No. They was judging me off the precept of what I believed, pertaining to what I was preaching and teaching in the Lord Jesus Christ. That's what they turned on me about. And the whole time while they turned on me, not realizing that it was them that was not understanding prophecies coming out of the book of Revelations as well as the book of Daniel. It was them that didn't have a broad mind in understanding that the teachings that I was teaching basically required an oxymoron type pursuit in understanding that there's always two sides to the coin. You know, there's a time for peace, there's a time for war, there's a time for this, there's a time for planting, there's a time for harvest. And for some reason, these people just turned on me. Well, you know, if that's what they want to do, that's fine. But whenever my younger brother died, it had such of a deep, profound effect in my life, especially everything that was going on right here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255, or 430 Beech Grove Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255, which both pieces of property connect together. It devastated me. It devastated me, and to think that I got arrested within about 10 days after my brother's death. And then I found out that I was being taken advantage of towards a bunch of people that I put some trust in, was basically taking everything that we'd ever had off the property. Between the death, the bad arrest that I don't, to this day, still don't think that I never should have been arrested for because of concern for 3 little children that was across the road. Between all of it, it was too much for me to handle, and basically I wanted to end my life, and that's what I attempted to do while I was in the Weakley County Sheriff's Department. I was driven to that. I was driven to that by all the resistance coming from the public. And to this day is the reason why, and I know it may not be right, but to this day, I can look at that and say, you know what? I tried to help them. They didn't want my help. They misconstrued what I was talking about. They didn't want to accept what I was talking about. So in essence, it couldn't have happened to a better group of people, because now all that stuff has backfired on them. And now right here in Northwest Tennessee and throughout America, it has basically brought grief and destruction into so many people's lives it ain't even funny just over a few people. Now granted, whenever it comes to the life of the innocents and those that didn't know nothing about me, I feel so sorry for them. I feel so sorry for them, because they're going through stuff right now that really and truly they shouldn't be going through, because we should have already been taken out of this situation. In other words, the second coming of Christ has been delayed because of their delay tactics. And to this day, they still don't recognize that. They still don't want to recognize that. They still don't want to believe that, because they'd rather put me in the category of me being a nut job, or put me in the category of me being a heretic, or put me in the category of somebody that's basically trying to swindle them, even though I've never asked them for a dime. So whenever I lost my last sibling pertaining to my DNA, it had a profound effect upon me. So these people that want to reject or deny their kinfolks, well, you can deny them all you want. You can reject them. You can not have nothing to do with them, etc., etc., etc. But the bottom line is they still carry your DNA regardless whether you like it or not. And I'm reflecting that upon the fact that these doctors, I think, have went way beyond the call of duty whenever it comes to them doing some of the stuff that they're doing, especially if you're going to clone somebody primarily. So if one day, if you ever get in trouble, you can take their kidney, you can take their heart, you can take their lung, you can take their liver, you can take their arm, or you can take whatever from that clone. I think those things are morally, ethically, spiritually wrong. Legally wrong. Should be legally wrong. Just like these doctors that want to perform these type of operations, especially on these children that has not got developed minds yet and really don't know what they're actually doing. They may pretend that they're grown-ups. They may pretend that they know what they're doing. But in actuality, one day they're going to have to live with those decisions. It's kind of like pulling a trigger on a gun, or trying to take the toothpaste out of a toothpaste dispensary. Once it leaves, it don't come back. You can't put the toothpaste back into the toothpaste bottle. You can't take the bullet and stop it after you pull the trigger, whatever that you're pointing at, which hopefully it won't be at another human being unless you're trying to protect your life. But there's certain things that once you do, you cannot reverse. And having a sex change, either surgically or medically, whenever it's all said and done with, you're not going to be able to reverse that. Just like aborting a child. After you abort that child, it ain't like you could put the embryo back into your body and all of a sudden, oh, I wish now that I hadn't done that. I wish now that I hadn't done that. Well, you need to think very, very carefully before you take that child's life. Because this is something that you're going to have to live with the rest of your life. You're going to have to look at yourself every day, every morning, every afternoon, whenever you look into the mirror, and you're going to have to say, you know what? I done something that I shouldn't have done. That's the reason why that we have grace through the Heavenly Father pertaining to mercy. That it's through the consciousness of God that God will forgive us for committing such horrible, horrible sins without the use of alcohol or drugs or any of the above to basically soothe our consciousness, because it's only God that can perform a miracle on us after we have made a horrible mistake. And that can be just as much on one perspective as it is the other. But I guarantee you, if you have aborted a child unnecessarily, no matter what woman is listening to this particular recording right now, unless it was a life-threatening situation, either with the child or the mother or both, I guarantee you that child, even though it was an undeveloped child, still has a soul, still has a spirit. And one day, that very child is going to look at that mother that done that to it and say, Mom, Why did you do that? Dad, why did you allow Mom to do that? Did you not want me? Did you not think that I had a right to live? Did you not think that I had a right to life? Why did you do that? Now, if you've come to the cross and the Lord has forgiven you of that type of a sin, you may be spared that type of grief one day of having to face some of the children that has been aborted in this world, and the mothers not having to stand and be accountable for, but it's going to take a supernatural event through the forgiveness of the blood of the Lord Jesus Christ for that to ever even have a possibility of occurring.
It's obviously a evolving debate. I mean, just in the last couple of years in Europe, there's big changes in terms of how they're thinking about it and how they're thinking about these risks and benefits. If it's evolving like that and changing, and England's pulling back and Sweden's pulling back, it strikes me as pretty heavy yellow light, if not red light, for this court to come in, the 9 of us, and to constitutionalize the whole area when the rest of the world, or at least the countries that have been at the forefront of this, are pumping the brakes on this kind of treatment because of concerns about the risks.
How did the other justices react to Brett's point? The justice's point, I should say.
Well, it's hard to say exactly what any of the 9 are thinking, but the European example came up over and over. And I think it's a really important demonstration of how this is an evidence-based decision. People can write this off as, oh, the red states are waging a culture war. But the United Kingdom, Sweden, Finland, Norway are not red states. They're countries that pioneered the use of these treatments on kids. Then they looked at the evidence, realized that the risks dramatically outweighed the benefits, and severely restricted access to these treatments. So we think that that's a really important data point to show that this is not some sort of bias. This is just looking at the medical evidence and making an informed decision.
Exactly. Because once more, you're dealing with undeveloped minds that has not made grown-up decisions properly, that one day is going to have to live with this decision. Think about that. And whenever the Bible says that we will be accountable for every idle word that we speak, it is imperative. Especially if you're doing anything in the eyes of the public to become influential one way or the other, it is imperative that what you talk about, that you can live with for the rest of your life, because you're going to be held accountable for the things that you tell people. You're going to be held accountable for how you respond to different situations. You're going to be held accountable of making sure that you're pointing people in the right direction, not based upon your mythology, but based upon the mythology that really isn't mythology, but based upon God's enlightenment of how that God intended for us to live, how God intended for us to respond, how God intended for us to treat one another, and how God intended for us to treat Him. That's the bottom line. That's where the rubber truly meets the road whenever it comes to a human being's consciousness, and whenever you're making decisions for children, regardless whether you're parenting or you're the doctor with the scalpel or you're the doctor giving out the drug, you're going to be held accountable. There's no ifs, ands, buts about it. You will be held accountable. Maybe not necessarily in the eyes of the man-made laws, but in the eyes of God's laws, I promise you, you will be held accountable one day for those things unless you've come to your senses and you've asked for forgiveness.
It went yesterday. Do you think Tennessee will prevail?
There are months to go while the court deliberates, so you never want to say how it's going to turn out, but we put on a good case. We got our arguments out. The briefing, I thought, did a phenomenal job of making our case, and we think we have strong points to make. I certainly hope we win.
All right. John Scrimetti, thank you so much. Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas. Thank you.
We all have choices There's no doubt. We all have
Long Island, about an
we
hour.
all have choices, and really and truly, one of the complex things about living on planet Earth today, especially here in America and throughout other modern day countries, is that in some cases we actually may have too many choices.
Temperature.
We actually may have too many choices to the point that it makes things confusing for people. It makes things more complex. It makes things more harder of making the right decision. Of rather not, am I making the correct right decision at the right time during this particular problem that I'm dealing with? Or am I going beyond the boundaries of that? Because I promise you, I've made some decisions in my life that I wish that I had not made. And it wasn't necessarily the decision that was forced upon to me to make the decision, but it was in the area that I made it in. Not being as strong of a loving parent of what I should have been. Growing up even through the extremes of having 2 broken legs and falling off a 4-story building, there was still areas in my life that even to this day I still regret. I regret that I wasn't compassionate enough with my 3rd and 4th wife, which was the same wife. That maybe it was something I said, maybe it was something I'd done, maybe it was how I treated her, maybe it was because I wasn't strong enough towards a man, maybe it was because I was lacking in some of my home project responsibilities versus my outdoor home project activities. I mean, there's so many things that once you get my age, you start thinking, well, is there a means to the end? What purpose have I served towards living the life that I've lived? And of course, if you're just a freelancer and you don't care what you've done and how that you've done it, these issues will probably never come up until the supernatural world, the hereafter world. But once you start getting my age, you start thinking about, well, what if I could have done things differently? What if I would have done this? What if I would have done that? And there's a lot of what ifs. There's a lot of regrets that a lot of people go through. And the only way that they can live with themselves is to go to the cross. To know that the Father knew the weaknesses of humanity. And that's the reason why that the Father sent the begotten Son into the world so that we would have a northern star, so that we would have a way of escape in understanding that we cannot save ourselves. The only way that we can be saved, is through and by the blood of the Lord Jesus Christ. I want to touch up on this real quick. I've said before, pertaining to global warming, I know a lot of people, whenever it gets cold, they got really very, very narrow minds. And they're very narrow-minded thinking. And they think, global warming, there ain't nothing to global warming. Global warming ain't nothing. Well, you can believe that if you want. We got people every day that are basically global warming deniers. But the fact of the matter is, the way that the weather has been so extreme, especially around these Great Lakes right here, around the big bodies of water, is that our summer seasons has extended because of environmental warming. And basically, we have been cheated out of about 2 to 3 weeks of fall, and we've been cheated out of about 2 to 3 weeks of spring. In other words, the summer has extended to the degree that now we have basically about 6 weeks extended summertime heat that we ordinarily wasn't dealing with, that now we are. And what it does whenever it comes this big flash, this cold Antarctic down from Canada, it catches all these bodies of water prematurely to the degree that they're not frozen. They're basically still water because it hadn't had time to freeze them. And because of that, whenever a system goes over, it starts setting and it starts turning itself into a snow machine. And it starts building the humidity and the steam and etc. coming off of the water, and it goes up into the cloud. And whenever it gets up into the cloud, it comes back down in the form of moisture. Well, whenever it comes down in the form of moisture in the wintertime, it comes down in the form of snow. And we're seeing deluge snows now, to where ordinarily we didn't see that before. That is a contributing factor to global warming. I mean, I don't know how many feet of snow that they had to go through up there in the Rocky Mountains. And like I said, this has happened before. I've actually got she was married to my uncle before they went through a divorce. Right there in the bottom tip of the Grand Rapids right down there. Somewhere just north of Indiana, probably about 150, 200 miles, which ordinarily they don't get hammered like they do up towards the northern area. But then you got all these other bodies of water right here that does the same thing, that catches this while it's still in the form of liquid versus ice. And whenever it does, it turns it into a snow machine. Let's watch this and see what I'm talking about real quick, because some of these areas off from the lakes has already done received 4 or 5 feet of snow. It's already done caused roofs to collapse and etc. just out of snow. Let's watch.
Is live near Lake Erie. That's Mentor, Ohio, east of Cleveland. How's it look there, Brandy? Good morning.
Good morning, Bill. It is a cold morning here in Mentor, where we are under a lake effect snow warning. Right now, there are hundreds of Department of Transportation crews out on the roads to clear them. Many schools in Northeast Ohio are closed for the day, maybe even through the weekend. But also, we're seeing an issue with power outages that are starting to grow. Now, you can see the snow that is all around us. Right now, it's not snowing, but we could see another 6 to 8 inches on top of what already fell from this past weekend. But what is more notable right now is the wind. At times you might hear it in my microphone, but take a look at this video from this morning. You can see the winds just whipping. 30 to 40 miles per hour winds is what we're getting. It's causing snow to blow around, especially what's already piled up on the roads, reducing visibility. On top of that, over in Erie, that's where the worst of the storm is happening. They are under a blizzard warning through 1 a.m.
Now you see that water? It's churning. It's going up and down. Watch it.
Saturday, winds gusting up.
See what I'm saying? That turns that into basically a snowmaking machine, because the water, not only is the water not skimmed over towards having ice, but the water is actually warmer than the atmosphere above the water or around the water, and because of it, it creates steam. Whenever the steam goes up, it turns into moisture content that comes down as snow. You wouldn't have had that this time of year pertaining to this particular system that's coming through there if the waters would have already done frozen over like they used to back 40 years ago, 50 years ago. There wasn't too many areas up in those lakes that didn't freeze during the winter months, and usually they started freezing somewhere in the latter part of October, first part of November. And now, what is this? No, this is December, what, the 5th? December the 4th? December the 5th? Something like that. They're still not frozen. And because of it, it's creating another atmosphere for itself. So whenever people get to thinking in their little narrow minds that so much for global warming, I'm freezing to death. You are. Thing about it is, what this is doing, it is causing the weather patterns to be erratical, to where whenever it does shift and all of a sudden you get this Antarctical blast that comes down from Canada, from basically the North Pole, it has now more of a tendency of not just freezing, flat. They call it a flash freeze, freezing. But now it has a tendency of going down into areas that hasn't ever seen cold go down that far, like down to Brownsville, Texas, or even causing citrus in Orlando or Daytona or in the Miami district to basically get hurt. One problem is creating other problems that's creating even more problems. So whenever people tell you that environmental crisis does not exist on planet Earth, they are lying to you. They do not know what they're talking about, and they are basically out of touch with reality. Because we know the holding pattern that we're on right now in comparison to the holding pattern 50 years ago, much less 100 years ago, much less 200 years ago, and we can see these things drastically changing. And as they're changing, it is changing the circumstances around these things, just like having a warmer planet Earth. Now you're creating more viruses, you're creating more diseases. There's more apt to bacteria to grow and allergies to get worse. I could go on and on and on whenever it comes to stuff like that.
Gusting up to 60 miles per hour, bringing visibility down to a quarter of a mile due to that blowing snow. And look, this is going to continue with the worst of it happening over the next 24 hours. Temperatures, though, Bill, I will say they are expected to rebound. So folks tired of the snow, well, it's going to go up to the 50s next week.
All right.
Back to you.
Okay, if they can wait that long. Thank you, Brandy. You stay warm.
Yeah.
Nice to see you. Thanks.
And I told you, after Thanksgiving, with all the airplane activity pertaining to people taking vacations, the people with the big money that can go to different places, because of all the carbon dioxide poisoning that goes up into the atmosphere, we're on a holding pattern right now that will get cold, but then it'll warm back up. And usually, or this is the way the holding pattern's been going, is sometimes because of the mass heat, it creates mass storms. Keep in mind, it wasn't but a few years ago whenever tornadoes started in Arkansas or Missouri, went over the Mississippi River and come over to Tennessee and basically hammered parts of Reelfoot Lake, and then come on through Casey, and then wound up going to Mayfield, Kentucky, and basically almost wiped them completely off the map, in addition to other tornado spawns that come off of the same system that come up through here that hit Dresden, Tennessee, basically in the dead winter. We're talking about like a week before Christmas or a few days before Christmas is whenever that happened. So we're seeing this holding pattern again and again and again. How come people's little teensy-weensy narrow minds can't remember and can't identify in how the weather used to be going back 35, 40, 50, 60 years ago versus the way that it is now? It's because they don't want to remember it. It's because they're blinded. It's because the devil has been lying to them, and because they have given in to the lie that the devil has led them to believe, now they want other people to believe in the same lie. And it's awful. Let's watch this real quick right here. Let me see. She's going to talk about something here pertaining to what's going on with our children right now up in Nashville, Tennessee. Please listen.
Against one individual, it is Donald Trump. And I think one of the reasons that the people of this country overwhelmingly came out and supported him is because they want to be able to trust these fundamental institutions like our Department of Justice again. He does not plan on retribution. He plans on restoring trust and faith of the American people into so many of these foundational elements of our country.
Exactly.
And so I would say, look, if anyone has done anything wrong, then maybe they should be worried, not because of Donald Trump, because maybe they've broken the law, but when it comes to Donald Trump, I think people are actually going to be very surprised to see how he operates, because there has been so much fear mongering. There's been so many scare tactics when it comes to Donald Trump.
Once more, been giving into too much information, making things too radical, making things too complex, too many choices. It used to be easy. It really did. It used to be easy to go into a grocery store and shop. But now, because of all the competitors, you're liable to have 7 or 8 different manufacturers making the same product, but which one tastes the best? It used to be easy to go buy a vehicle because they had a standard set of colors. Now, today, you can actually pre-order an automobile right down to the hubcaps of what type of hubcap you want, what type of color interior you want, what type of stereo you want, what type of color vehicle you want. That makes it that much more complex in a lot of people to be able to sit down and pre-design or order all this stuff for themselves. So, too much information can actually be bad. And it talks about that in the book of Daniel. It says that the day will come to where they will become wiser, but weaker. Why are we becoming weaker? First of all, we're being wore out. Another reason why we're becoming weaker is because of artificial intelligence. AI is now making decisions for us. Why do we want to be creative whenever AI can do it for us? And what we're doing, we're basically stealing a generation, a culture, away from a group of people that used to be very creative whenever it come to writing music, whenever it come to how publishers was publishing books, or how that they was writing books. All these things are being taken from society right now. And that should be one of the biggest red lights going off, in addition to what the doctors are doing to our children right now, that is basically changing our society, changing who and what we're supposed to be according to old school methods. And some people say, well, that's old school methods. That ain't no good. We're evolving. We're changing. To some degree, I agree with that. We do need to evolve. There are things that they done back years ago that are no longer effective, or we have better ways of doing it today. But there's also things that we're doing today that we should have just stayed on track with, because now it's making it too complex for everybody. So it can sway just as easily to the left as it does the right in all these different changes.
We remember how he was the first term in office. He didn't start World War III. He was actually the first president in 82 years not to start a new war, not to get America into a new war. And much in the same way, I think people are going to see very quickly that this is a man who really just wants to go in there and take charge of this country as the American people mandated. Secure our border, bring down inflation, get us out of wars, and do the...
Every administration, from one presidency to the other, from what I can observe for the past 40 years, has become that much more harder because of what the administration either done or did not do prior to the one that's coming in power now. And every time you do that, it delays success, and it also makes it that much harder to straighten out the messes that others have made before you get in power. Of course, if you don't have no age on you, and you're a young whippersnapper, you're probably not going to be able to relate to what I'm talking about. But these elderly people, the baby boomers, that have sat and watched this stuff evolve and change the way that it has, how come they have allowed for this to come up onto us the way that they have? And most importantly, how come they're not willing to accept their responsibilities in their failures of what that they have done? Because you're never going to be able to correct an alcoholic or a drug abuser or anybody else that's got an addiction until you realize that you've got an addiction. You realize that you've got a problem. Once you get out of that denial that, hey, wow, I really do have a problem. I got a drinking problem. I don't just drink every once in a while. I drink way too much. Once you realize that you got a problem, then maybe you can do something about the problem. But as long as you're denying that you don't have that problem, you're going to continue to have that problem. And odds are that same problem is only going to fester and grow and get worse and worse and worse. It's the same way with the administrations. Once one administration starts failing or starts crawfishing, going backwards, then the next administration, that's much more tougher for them to realign everything and get things back on track again. And then that administration don't do their proper job, and then the next one gets handed these problems. I mean, whenever you inherit what Donald Trump is fixing to inherit pertaining to all the problems in the world and the problems in America, you would almost have to be Jesus Christ himself to be able to straighten out these problems. That's the reason why I did not cast my vote on one party or the other, because I felt like that if you put both parties in power at the same time and you was working for the benefit of the people in America, you still could not wave a magic wand over the American people's heads and think that all our problems was suddenly just going to up and go away, because they're not. We didn't get into this problem overnight, and we're not going to get out of this problem overnight. And it's going to take some sacrificing for all of us to straighten out what others have done or didn't do that they should have done. It's going to take all of us to do that. And if we're not willing to do that as a party, as a whole, as a group, as a team, well, you can expect things to only get worse. Especially whenever it comes to all these dramatic forces of nature that are basically continue to keep lashing out up onto the inhabitants here, up onto the planet, that are only escalating. Not only are we seeing more of it, but now we're seeing it even intensifying as it's doing it, and now it's becoming even radical in coming in different times where it didn't never used to be that way, and now it is. So yes, our environment, our planet is changing. And as it's changing, you have to ask yourself the question, why is it changing? Well, we didn't evolve in certain areas that we should have evolved in. That's what I was telling you a while ago. Sometimes, yeah, you figure out that, hey, the way the old school people done it wasn't as beneficial as it is today. Let's do it this way, and it's a whole lot better. In some cases, that's true. But in other cases, you may want to quit making things so complex towards having people make so many different decisions, because their little finite minds can't take it. It's driving them over the edge.
Great things for America. He has no intention on retribution or revenge.
Laura, there was a really big case yesterday heard in front of the Supreme Court. The Biden
This is what I was
administration pushed
wanting
back against
people to
Tennessee,
listen
which
to.
has a law that banned the treatment of minors for sex reassignment surgery. And one of the justices that was put forward by Biden is Justice Brown Jackson. And she compared the Tennessee law banning gender transitions for minors to past laws banning interracial marriage. Listen.
Some of these questions about sort of who decides and the concerns and legislative prerogatives, et cetera, sound very familiar to me. They sound in the same kinds of arguments that were made back in the day, 50s, 60s, with respect to racial classifications and inconsistencies. I'm thinking in particular about Loving, and I'm wondering whether you thought about the parallels, because I see one, as to how this statute operates and how the anti-miscegenation statutes in Virginia operated.
To that, or to the bigger point, Laura, how does the Trump team see this case?
Well, I can tell you how I see it as a mom. Like, I have kids who are 5 and 7 years old, and I think what we're specifically talking about here are minors, are children. And when you look at some of the impact of, some of these drugs that are being given to kids, some of the irreversible procedures performed upon them, it's very frightening for a lot of parents out there. I think that comparison is wildly outrageous, personally. But I can tell you that, all Republicans typically want is to protect our kids. We should never be performing procedures or giving drugs to our children in the United States that are going to do them harm and going to do permanent damage to them. And I do think that a lot of people are talking about the fact that maybe this is a state's issue. Maybe that's ultimately where it ends up. But it is a very hot button topic for a lot of people.
It is a hot button topic. And the fact of the matter is, the things that I was talking to you about a while ago pertaining to parenting, grown-ups, you're making decisions for these children that has undeveloped minds. And one day that child is no longer going to have the same undeveloped mind, but the body has now been readjusted to whatever that they thought that they wanted during the time that they thought that they wanted it. Not giving them time to grow up, not giving them time to mature, not giving them time to make their own decisions about their bodies whenever it's time for them to do so, if that's truly what they want to do. Because I can honestly say that there's a lot of things that I used to consider bad that now I've reached over in liking. I'm going to just use this for an example pertaining to some things that I eat back whenever I was growing up as a child. I hated that stuff. I hated spinach. I hated this. I hated that. But today, I've learned to like it. And maybe not so much that I've acquired a taste for it, but I know the quality of what I'm eating is good for me, and because of it, I've learned to like it. Same way with other things that I've adjusted to, that I've made arrangements towards changing. And then there's been other things that I've changed to that I decided, you know what, that wasn't the best decision, now was it? I think I'm going to go back to the old ways. I think I'm going to go back to what I used to like back years ago, because that was really working for me very well. These people that are doing this to themselves, it goes beyond a moral issue. It is a physical safety issue. And whenever these children are doing this, and these doctors are doing this to these children, regardless whether it's surgery, or doing it by modern day medications, hormone pills or whatever, Pudica, whatever that they call it, they should be held accountable. That's the only way that you're going to be able to really put a cap on this, to control what's basically out of control right now, especially whenever it comes to altering our society. And that's exactly what it's doing. It is altering our society. That's in addition to the things that are morally incorrect based upon the Northern Star out of the King James. Look, I realize that these problems didn't just pop up overnight. Just like that guy was talking a while ago over there in Europe and France and all them other places. They're now realizing that their decisions that they made a few years ago has consequences. And people like myself, all we're trying to do, and this lady here speaking, and other people that's been on the show this morning pertaining to what I'm recording, we're just trying to prevent people of going through unnecessary pain and unnecessary harm that they should not have had to have went through if they would have just listened. If they would have just taken a little bit of advice and said, you know what, maybe you're right. Maybe as a doctor, I really don't need to be doing this. Even though I've got the parents consult, even though I've got their signature saying that this is what they want for little Johnny and little Sally, maybe I am going beyond the perimeters. Maybe the good old American profit dollar bill is not what I want to do and how that I want to do it. Maybe I don't want to work in an abortion clinic towards killing unborn children, because it's just as much on one party as it is the other in people that's providing that type of service. And that's where we as adults have to stand up, let ourselves be heard, even though we live in a diplomatic society. Let ourselves be heard. That way other people can listen to what we're talking about, and they can make their own decisions, and rather not they're going to go astray, or rather not they're going to keep what they know is the right decision based around that Northern Star.
People, there seems to be a big shift in this direction to try to push kids, into this transgender ideology, and it is very frightening, I think, for a lot of parents right now.
The court subsides. Quickly here, Michael Watley, you worked very close.
I'm gonna tell you something else that's frightening that I ain't really never thought about until just within the past 20 years, after my wife walked out of my life in 2005 because of standing up for the Lord Jesus Christ. I talk about the dating scene sometimes from time to time, that basically I still have the same desires that I've always had towards a male being attracted to the female society, because my gate don't open both ways, and it never has and it never will. But I use the analogy a lot of times. The reason why that I haven't never partaken in the dating scene is because of all the different venereal diseases and sexual diseases and everything out there. But there's also another side to that I've looked at very hard towards in the aspect of whenever I was growing up in the dating scene, we didn't have to worry about dating a female that had been transfigurated, that used to be a male but now is presenting themselves as a female. I didn't have to worry about that whenever I was growing up. Today, these kids growing up today, they don't know who they're really dating. They don't know who that they're being engaged with, because it can be just as easily one way as it is the other, making things once more that much more complex. Of the person that gives their whole heart to that person, come to find out, well, you never was a female, was you? You was a male at one time, and now you've transfigurated over to being a female, which basically makes you a aftermarket male, makes you a generic male, because you're not really a male, because you wasn't born by being a male. Now, this is the arguing dilemma that a lot of people are arguing about and saying, well, because I made a choice towards me being born a female and I wanted to be a male, and now I'm a male, I'm really a male, or vice versa. I was born a male, now I'm really a female because of various things that I've done to my body. No, you're not. You are a generic type person, or a aftermarket type female, or aftermarket type male, because you have chosen to do this against your own biological DNA. If God intended for you to be a male, you would have been born a male. If God intended for you to be a female, you'd have been born a female. People are making decisions today that cross the norms. And this is where our lawmakers, our politicians, this is where our preachers, this is where our parents has to step in and voice their opinions about these things. And because, I've got a granddaughter that's less than 2 years old. Time goes by quick. It don't take long for time to slide on by. And the next thing you know, she'll be having to make these same decisions whenever she's 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. Wow. If my grandpa would have just spoke up and said that these moral things are wrong, plus they're wrong psychologically, plus they're wrong physically, maybe I wouldn't have to be making these choices towards me being a female wanting to be a male, or me being a male wanting to be a female. You see where I'm going with all this? You see where all this has gone to just within the past 30, 40 years? Because these are areas that we didn't have to address 30, 40 years ago. Just like there's 1,000 other different things that we're addressing today that we didn't have to address 30 or 40 years ago. But we're addressing them. It's affecting our lives in some form or fashion, but it's not only affecting our lives, but it's affecting our atmosphere. It's affecting our planet. It's affecting the forces of nature around us. These are the things that the Bible warned us about that would take place in the last days pertaining to the sorrows. You want the sorrows to stop? You want the sorrows to slow down? Then start doing the proper things according to the Bible. And if not, be expecting these things to increase towards them being even worse. Worser in frequency and worser in intensity. Be expecting for more gun violence. Be expecting for more radicalness coming from various people that we didn't have to deal with these things 50 years ago. But now we are. Proof is in the pudding. We're in a holding pattern. How do you break the holding pattern? That's the $64,000 question. How do you break the holding pattern? You go back. You go back. The very things that Vice President Hamas, whatever her name is, it's Harrison, talked about. Oh, we're never going to go back. We're never going to go back. Well, if you never want to go back, guess what? You can expect things to get worse in your life. You can expect the intensity of decisions to be more complex. You can expect the consequences of things to happen that's going to be more dire. You can expect the sorrows of the forces of nature to be even more dramatic and worse. You don't want to go back? Okay, you don't want to go back. So if you don't go back, you can't have your cake and eat it too. I guarantee you, if you don't go back, then expect the consequences that goes along with not going back. But if we all went back at the same time, we could straighten out this planet by straightening out our own lives. But it's going to take a supernatural force to do it. It's going to take a real revival to revolutionize our lives to be able to do this if we're ever going to see true peace and utopia. The things that the Bible talks about that are supposed to occur before the opening of the red horse, before the opening of the second seal. These are the things that I've been preaching and teaching on now for over 30 plus years that obviously has just been going into one ear and out the other. You wonder how come? I know in the eyes of my son it sounds like that I'm a a-hole. But you wonder how come that I say the things that I say regarding it couldn't have happened to a better group of people. I don't say those things lightly in wanting these things to occur to these people. Even Jesus went up into the mountain and looked down upon to Jerusalem and said, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, I've tried to help you. He emphasized it by saying, I have gathered you together as a hen would gather her little chickens, but you still would not listen. And because you did not listen, expect the complications and the consequences of that goes along with that. Because you can't have your cake and eat it too. And that's exactly what the human characteristics has been wanting to do now ever since the beginning of time. They've been wanting their cake and eat it too, and it don't go that way. You're breaking the laws of nature. And if you don't think that, well, then continue to be on the path that you're on towards breaking the laws of nature, breaking the laws of God, and see what happens to your life. Because the Bible is very clear that what you're going to wind up doing is dying in your sins. You won't die a glorious death. You won't die a heroic death. You won't die in somebody rushing into a burning bus and rescuing 25 children before your life is taken, you'll die a slow, miserable, pathetic life. And that's exactly what various people in Northwest Tennessee and America wanted to happen to Dennis Jackson, because they didn't want Dennis Jackson to go up against the axis of evil. The real evil, the true evil, not the made-up evil. And I'm not saying it's Saddam Hussein, and I'm not saying that all them other things that went on over during Desert Storm and Desert Shield and Afghanistan wasn't justifiable, because in a lot of ways it was. But you're still not going after the head source. You're still not cutting the head off of the snake. And we can't choose whether or not we like this snake or we don't like this snake. We know who the snake is. We know who the Satan, the physical Satan, is over in Saudi Arabia. We know where the mastermind come from pertaining to plotting and planning and killing over 3,000 people that to this day we still haven't gotten over. And never will get over. Just like Pearl Harbor that got hit December the 7th, I think it's Saturday. Do you think that we've gotten over that? Do you think that we've gotten over Pearl Harbor? No way, Jose. We're still being affected by that every day. Now, what I can say is what has recently happened in South Korea. Even though their leader basically wigged out and over-dramatized whatever was going on to the degree that he done what he done, is that democracy passed in that test. And I've seen it now in the past 10 years, especially since COVID has hit, of democracies being challenged again and again and again. Especially since Russia done what they've done to Ukraine. Especially since we walked away from Afghanistan, and then all of a sudden, less than 10, 11 days later, they surrender to the Taliban. We're seeing where our way of life that we've been taught that was the best life pertaining to our democracy is being challenged again and again and again. Now, they can call it a constitutional crisis. They can call it a Donald Trump crisis. They can call it election denying crisis. They call it whatever they want to call it. But the fact of the matter is, our democracy held. It held in South Korea because it was the people that stood up and said, you know what, we're not going back to this. We know what being ruled by a dictator is like. And really and truly, when we blame Putin for the things that's going on right now in Ukraine, it's really just as much of the people's fault as it is the leaders to the people over there. Because if the people don't have enough backbone to stand up against such authoritarian dictatorship, well then basically they deserve to live in that type of environment. They deserve to live in that type of environment, even at the expense of sacrificing themselves. And until the people stand up in likeness to freedom and justice for all, pertaining to true democracy, the same as the Southern Koreans did just less than 48 hours ago, 72 hours ago, they stood up and they said, no way, Jose, are we going to do this. So now that leader has jeopardized his leadership to the point that he'll have to be forced to either resign or they'll impeach him. They'll get him out of there because of what he done. And there's no doubt, I'm pretty sure that there's some serious stuff going on over in South Korea pertaining to the things that's been going on with North Korea. But he jumped the gun. He went beyond the acceptability of what the people felt like was right, and because of it, they stood up, and I praise them for that. I do. I admire the Southern Korean people that stood up and said, "There's no way, Jose, we're going to go back to this type of life. We'd rather die than we would to go back to this type of life." And they let that be known. And within, I think, about 6 or 7 hours, that guy had to relinquish his order towards mandating that type of martial law upon his own people. There's probably no doubt. There's a lot of sympathizers in South Korea that's sympathizing with the people in North Korea. But it's the people in North Korea that didn't have the backbone to stand up against their parliament, their rulers, the same as you got to look the same over there in China as well as over there in Russia. It's the people that didn't have the backbone of standing up and saying, you know what, we'd rather die than for you to rule us this way. So I admire what the South Koreans have recently done in letting their voice be heard, even at the expense of becoming violent, forcefully violent, breaking out windows, taking chairs and throwing them into buildings, and I don't know, it's probably still an uproar over there right now. Maybe they can settle it down, but I admire for what that they have done in the name of democracy. And that's what it takes. It takes somebody with a stern, strong will of saying, you know what, there's certain limitations that authoritarian figures should do to their own citizens. And there are certain things that they shouldn't do. And South Korea stood up and said very boldly and very clearly in what that was not acceptable pertaining to that declaration of martial law that less than about 7 hours was reversed.
Successfully, I would argue, after the election. We know that he will stay as chairman of the RNC or a co-chair. What's your future? What's your next role?
Oh, the big question, Bill, the easy one at the end.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I'm so lucky because I did work with an incredible team. We did succeed in doing everything we set out to do. We obviously had this overwhelming win for Donald Trump. And I'm trying to figure out what my future looks like right now. I'm fortunate that I have a lot of things potentially in front of me. And as soon as I make a decision, I promise to let everybody know.
Give us a call.
Yeah, officially, are you a resident of North Carolina or are you officially a resident of Florida?
I'm an official resident of Florida for 3.5 years.
Let her go.
There might be a hint there. That's what I'm saying. Okay. Thank you, Laura. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
She may have dual residency too. She may be a resident still in North Carolina, resident in Florida. I know a lot of people can do that and does do that.
Appreciate it. Nice
Bye.
to see you.
Thank you, guys.
Later tonight, make sure to tune into the 6th Annual Patriot Awards. Sean Hannity is going to do the honors, and you can watch.
And that's a very, very good reward. Just like raising the money for these veterans that's been all tore up and blowed up and burned up. That's what they're doing right now is advertising that right here. That's a very, very good thing for society to be involved in. That was one of the things that my brother and I, pertaining to the St. Dale's Recovery Shelter here at 291 Thompson Road, that's one of the things that we
Once again
had desires or compassions towards wanting to do, is to be able to help our veterans. But man, did they ever kick up about it. Certain people in this area, man, did they ever kick up.
Leading the nation in people coming across. And Lieutenant, you had in this area where we were a pretty big group just a few days ago. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so on Sunday, Griff, in this area that we're standing in right now, we had a group of 176 illegal immigrants that came across. And the reason why they're coming across, because there is gaps between this fencing. And in that group, we had 11 from Afghanistan and also unaccompanied children. So those are some of the challenges that we're dealing with right now when we see these smaller groups, 200-300 a day, more unaccompanied children, more special interest aliens from the Middle East, West Africa. So that's what we're dealing with right now in the Eagle Pass area. And with that, as we talk about unaccompanied children, that's really our focus for now, too. That's a concern to us, because anytime a child comes across that border alone, we want to ensure the safety of that child with the brief moment that we have with them.
And Dana, we want to show you, we've been seeing blue-colored wristbands, which, Lieutenant, we haven't seen this since you and I a year or so ago over in RGV, but now we're seeing it here for the first time in this area. What does that tell you?
Well, this is a tactic that we typically saw in the Rio Grande Valley with the wristbands. And now we're seeing it in Eagle Pass. And what it really tells us, it signifies that the cartels are capitalizing on illegal immigration, people that are coming across that border. And even though the numbers are small, like you mentioned, 200-300 a day, they're able to increase their profits by doubling the amount of money they charge people to get across that border, and with that, using these wristbands in this area.
And lastly, in the last 10 seconds or so I got, the smuggling is surging.
It is, and I think it's because people don't really know what's going to happen come January.
Yep.
So we're going to start to see more human smuggling and more people trying to sneak into the country.
And Dana, we're seeing the smuggling operations with cars and the Horse Patrol unit here in Maverick County also stopping migrants. Dana,
You know, I love that horse patrol. Okay. Can't wait to see you again. Thanks, Griff.
We got 21 minutes past the hour now. Multiple crises overseas hitting the boiling point in the final weeks of the Biden-Harris administration. Important stuff here, too. A new Ronald Reagan Institute survey finds that most Americans support a bigger role for U.S. leadership on the world stage. Rachel Hoff is the policy director for the Institute. Got a big weekend out there at the Defense Forum in Simi Valley. Good morning, Rachel, and thank you for your time here. Want to pull up one thing here on defense spending. It's really interesting. We've been talking about cutting government spending all morning. 79% in your survey, 79, support more defense spending. What did you find? Explain it to us, Rachel.
That's right, and it's a record high. We've been doing this polling at the Ronald Reagan Institute, figuring out what the American people believe about these pressing foreign policy, national security, and defense issues. We've never seen more Americans saying that they want the government to increase its spending on defense. And Bill, you pointed to the instability and conflict and chaos that we're seeing around the world. We got to think that's the reason why they want our military to be prepared to meet those threats and to do so from a position of strength.
Yeah,
absolutely, 100%. People are finally wising up and realizing that if we continue to water down things and continue to be weaker and weaker, it just raises that much more of a problem in the fact that we won't have the freedoms that our ancestors fought and died for. We won't have the same decisions today as what they did after World War II. People are wisening up, which is a good thing. They're finally waking up over here in America, realizing that, hey, if we don't strengthen our defense, we may not have no defense to strengthen. Now, ain't that a creepy, scary thought to think about?
Is a Republican senator out of Mississippi. He wants to increase spending by $55 billion. And we'll see how this goes over with the whole Doge operation on the Capitol. Back to the survey. Here we go now. How concerned are you about the increased cooperation between China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea? This is fascinating. 86%. I wonder how much this past election reflected that number, because what I read in your survey is that a lot of young people were concerned about this.
That's true. We're seeing increasing concern among all Americans, but particularly young Americans. We're seeing young Americans wanting America in response to this malign cooperation that we're seeing between authoritarian actors, our competitors in China, Iran, North Korea, Russia. They're collaborating more and more to push back against American interests and the interests and values of the free world. Not just young Americans, but all Americans, and frankly, Americans of all political stripes, those who voted for President Trump in this election and those who voted for Vice President Harris, are concerned about this cooperation between authoritarian actors. They want the United States to be capable and prepared to do something about it.
Last thing here. Here's the conclusion, okay? I want our viewers to hear this from your survey. The American people have made clear their desire for the United States to lead the effort to end the violence gripping the world. The next administration has an opportunity to reaffirm America's role in the world, charting a course that both ensures national security and promotes freedom. Did you find whether or not there was confidence in the new president to do that?
You know, confidence in any president, whether it's the current president or the future president who will be taking office in January, obviously is split along partisan divides. But what we found is true on a bipartisan basis is that no matter who's in the White House, Americans want the United States to be engaged on the global stage, as you said, to take the lead when it comes to international events, to defend our interests around the world, our values around the world, and to your point just there, Bill, to end the conflict that we're seeing and to not shy away from that and withdraw, but to engage and help facilitate an end to the conflict we're seeing in Ukraine, that we're seeing in the Middle East, and to deter any potential conflict that we might see.
Big issues on the table. Yeah, we'll see you this weekend.
I think since everybody has had to go through COVID here in America, I can't speak for all these other different countries, but I think the people have finally come to the conclusion that they have lost a great deal of their freedoms towards not having money in their pockets to be able to go and become independent and buy houses, and a lot of their freedom has been taken away to the point that a lot of these kids, now, they have to, not because they want to, they have to stay with their parents because they can't afford to get out and live in a free society no longer, because it's become so expensive. Especially whenever they continue to keep jacking up interest rates the way that they was doing. It was almost as if they was purposely wanting to bankrupt America. I've never seen it like it is right now. So maybe, hopefully, fortunately, the new millenniums, whoever that they are, will be able to help grasp to turn this around, because obviously the baby boomers and the elderly people are the ones that's put us here to begin with. Thank God they're finally waking up in understanding and in realizing that freedom is not free, even at the expense of one having to sacrifice one's own life for. Thank God they're finally coming to their senses. Thank you, Jesus.
The Defense Forum always gives us very interesting, creative ideas, not just about today, but about the future. Rachel Hoff will see you in Simi Valley, California. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Bill.
All right. Dana.
Right now, day 3 of jury deliberations in the case against Daniel Penny are underway. Jurors debating whether he should be convicted in the chokehold death of Jordan Neely. We will bring you the latest from the courthouse. Plus, the acting Secret Service director testifying before House lawmakers today what it could mean for the probe into the assassination attempts on the president-elect.
See where this is all going here real quick. Here we go.
A culture.
Back up a little bit. This is pertaining to Homeland Security. Stop it right there. No, back up a little bit more.
Tim on that in the.
Back up just a little bit more. Right there.
On President-elect Trump's life. Remember, there was the incident at his golf club in Florida. He was here talking to lawmakers just a couple of days before that. One of the big questions for Ronald Roe is accountability, and I pressed him on that in the hallway as he arrived this morning. Listen. What about the discipline that needs to be meted out? You allude to that in your opening statement. Are people convinced that the people who screwed up in Pennsylvania are going to be held accountable? Is that something you're going to talk about? Now, Jason Crow, the Democrat from Colorado, he is the top Democrat on this committee. He says that there is not a culture of speaking up inside the Secret Service and not correcting errors. And this is an issue of frustration for the committee chairman, Mike Kelly of Pennsylvania.
There's a lot of paranoia that goes through all these different agencies, the federal agencies. Why you ask me that question? And my reply to that is, why are you asking me why I'm asking the question? Just answer it.
Now, Ronald Roe, he insists that discipline is in fact coming. He says that this is something that bothers him. Listen.
Let me be clear. There will be accountability, and that accountability is occurring. Quite frankly, it does frustrate me. But it is essential that we recognize the gravity of our failure. I personally carry the weight of knowing that we almost lost a protectee.
Now, something they talked about at the hearing at President-elect Trump's golf club. They now have unmanned canines, kind of these robot dogs patrolling the property there right now. Also, this committee will put out its report next week. Bill?
Okay, Chad, waiting for more answers on that. Chad Pilgrim, live on the Hill. Thank you. Dana.
And we are on verdict watching the Daniel Penny trial. Jurors have asked to take a second look at several pieces of evidence.
I don't know the extent of all that pertaining to that guy killing that guy on the subway. I don't see whether there's any reason why that somebody has to kill somebody, especially if they don't have a gun or a knife and their life ain't in imminent danger. But that's just me. Looked to me like you could restrain them, get them pinned down. Even if you had to take duct tape them and duct tape them down. Ought to be other means of dealing with people other than just killing them.
Giving over the past few weeks, one family claims they followed a drone in their car, and while it hovered above them, the clock in their car changed times. Then they say the clock went back to normal after they drove off. Witnesses also talk about the size of these drones. Some say they can be as big as a small car. Despite the growing concern, though, Morris County officials insist, quote, there continues to be no known threat to public safety. But residents tell Fox they're becoming more worried. The FAA is continuing to temporarily restrict flights over Trump National Golf Club in Bedminster and the Picatinny Arsenal military base, but authorities in Morris County this morning say they have no new information to share as the mystery continues.
Okay, keep us posted. This is bizarre. We need to know more. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. So before we close out today, given the Patriot Awards later tonight, we want you to meet two very special sisters. From southwestern Ohio, the town of Harrison, they are giving back in a huge way. They have raised more than $30,000 to help the Honor Flight Network, which flies veterans to Washington, D.C., where they visit the memorials that honor their sacrifice. On Veterans Day last month, they raised nearly $4,000. Meet Tessa, age 12, and Rhea, age 8, and their mother, Rachel, is doing great work. Good morning, ladies, and thank you for being here today. It's great to see you. Rhea, you look great in the red, white, and blue. Excellent decision on your part. And Tessa, I love the hat. So since you're the older sister, where did you come up with this idea? What inspired you?
My mom inspired me because her friend invited us to an honor flight, and we just really liked it, and we just wanted to keep going back there.
Oh. What you like about it, Tessa?
I love seeing the veterans and their smiles after they get home from the honor flight.
Wow.
Amen.
So you made a difference, didn't you?
Good for you. Good for you.
You made a difference?
Yeah.
Love that. Rhea, what inspires you at such a young age to help people in their senior years?
How do you do it?
Because I love our veterans because they're so nice.
They are. They make you laugh?
Yeah.
I bet they appreciate you too. Rachel, how have you inspired your daughters? This is really an amazing story.
Yes, it is.
We just love our veterans here, and we know most of the veterans right now on the honor flights are Vietnam veterans, Korean. We know that they had no homecoming at all. A lot of them were spit on. People tried to fight them.
Right.
So to be there at these honor flight homecomings and be able to welcome them home and give them the homecoming that they truly deserved, shake their hands, thank them for their service.
Absolutely.
It just gets really emotional. They're happy, they're crying. It's just such a great program. Our honor flight here in Cincinnati, run by Tom and Cheryl Pop, is just one of the best organizations that we've ever been a part of.
Hey,
So
Rachel,
it's an honor to make us raise money for this.
$30,000 can help a lot of people. What is the cost to take one veteran to Washington, D.C.?
I think it's around $700 now.
Okay.
Per veteran.
How can people help? We got the website, honorflighttristate.org. Is that the link?
That's the link.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, so here's what we're going to try and do. All right, Tuesday was Giving Tuesday, okay? And Tessa and Rhea, we're going to try and drive some money your way, all right? So that you can make more dreams come true. Do you like that idea?
Yeah.
I dig it. Keep doing great work. And Rachel, congratulations. You've done well.
Thank you.
You bet. See you, ladies. We'll see you down the road. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
They're great.
Absolutely. That was a good show. going, keep going.
Cheadle, but he's asking about his presence at that 9/11 ceremony and what the purpose of his positioning on that day was. And you can see it got extraordinarily emotional in there. So we're going to continue to keep a close eye on what's going on as they try to figure out the future.
Let's try to find that real quick. That's bound to be going
Good
on
for golf for
live
taking this
somewhere here. That ain't going to be it, I don't think.
Serious.
No, let's go over here. Right, let me see here.
To the United States.
House Representatives, see if it's going on here.
Yeah, sort of.
Nope, it's not there.
Of FBI background investigations. After weeks of reports that President-elect Trump planned to bypass the FBI entirely, it was a relief to hear that the Trump transition team had finally signed an agreement this week to allow the FBI to conduct background investigations.
All right, let's go forward here because that ain't what I'm wanting to look at. Let's go right here to CNN.
Yep. Especially right now, we're seeing just such that surge of money in people's accounts.
Not there. I don't think it's going to be in that one either.
Only place to watch.
So if it's going on live, how come I can't find it?
Headlines on Sirius.
I cannot find it. Hang on. Hang on. We done went there. Let's try this. News.
You. Thank you for that.
Newsmax.
Good to see you. All right. National Report returns right after.
Not on Newsmax. Live.
Was in an
Nope.
Vehicle is out of warranty.
Nope.
The repair cost.
I don't know where it would be then.
And that
I don't know where it would be.
It's reviewed hundreds of nominees' background investigations.
I can't find it.
frame and
Well, folks, I'm sorry about that. We're not going to be able to find it live. It don't look like.
need your
Truly sorry about that.
Terry just spoke with NBC News. Let's go right.
They're for some reason they're not putting this on mainstream TV.
Phone action
If
formula.
they are, I can't find it.
A $0 eye exam.
Nothing. You want to try this real quick, maybe? Maybe be on some prime time show?
you.
We love
No, press right.
population
What is this right here? Go to that right there for a minute. What is this? That's definitely it. That's definitely not it.
Jamie Lee
That's
Curtis
not
and
it.
Megan.
That's the price of right. Dr. Phil, The View. I don't know what The View is.
Well,
Well, there you go. Well, it looks like we've hit a barrier here, folks, towards not going live to that particular
Child in crisis.
video thing right now that's going on over in the Hill in Washington, D.C. So I guess we'll just tune out here on this and say
don't wait. Order your bull shot now.
good luck to all
To
of
order,
us.
call
God bless America. God bless our troops. And
That he
God have mercy on all of us in our future towards where we go from this moment on. I don't know why that I couldn't pick that up on that live hearing right now on Homeland Security pertaining to everything. I'm pretty sure later on this afternoon it'll go more public. But as of right now, they're keeping it under wraps. Thanks again. God bless. And shalom.